Ladies and gentlemen, it's the collab you didn't know you needed. The Canary Room visits OC Aviary. He's taller in the flesh. He's taller than me. Look, I'll have to stand up. Listen, it is, of course, my good mate Ollie from OC Aviary. Ollie, it's wonderful to finally be here.
Yes, very much so. Really pleased that you're around. I think it's been something that's a long time in the coming and probably something that people have been asking for a few years. So it's great to have you here and show you around everything today.
Oh, God bless you. God bless you. He's as lovely in the flesh as he is on the telly, everyone. Well, listen, we have a very special episode. We are in one of Ollie's numerous. We're just going to say numerous.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right word for it. Yeah.
Numerous. I thought I had problems with my collection of birds, but I've met my match, everyone here, because this man is doing a lot of wonderful things. So listen, everyone, you know what to do. Grab yourself a cuppa, and as always, sit back and enjoy the show. Right, so Ollie, we're in location one.
Yes.
Let's call it location one, shall we?
Location
the main
one,
bird room.
Yeah, the main bird room is probably the right way of describing it, I would say.
So, and look, viewers to both the channels will have seen this room. It is one of the things you'll never guess on television, though, is the airflow in here is absolutely fantastic. So as soon as you walk in, it's light, it's airy, it's breezy, which is obviously key for the environment for the birds. So fair play to you on that, mate. And we've got your North Touch frills, which to be honest, do nothing for me, Ollie, as a canary man. But I respect I respect the fact that you keep them and you're trying to do your bit for them. And they are. There's sort of beauties in there. They're not gibozos, I'll say that, mate. They're not.
Definitely not. I think they're one of those where what I was keen to do is, first off, I wanted a canary I like. I wanted something a bit different. I mean, no disrespect to the five world, but there's a lot of people keeping five. So let's keep something a little bit different. So I managed to get a couple of pairs a few years ago from a guy called Dave Brown, who's one of the top breeders of this breed in the UK. We've got 3 pairs for this year, and really the idea was, first off, let's make sure that we've got something that's a good parent. I think that's really important, particularly as I don't want to be having the hassle of having loads of feeders. Additionally, they're useful as feeders for the native birds, so occasionally, if a greenfinch leaves its chick or its eggs, the frills have proven to be very good parents for that purpose. And then finally they're probably a bit of I would say an underappreciated breed. I think there's not many people keeping them. They are a bit of something different. And particularly in the old and rare world as well. I think it's nice to also advertise that, because I think something that a lot of people probably glance over is the old and rare section, and it's lovely to have them, and I mean they're having a good sing at the moment.
Yeah, they certainly are. And I think that's important, and that kind of for people who because everybody feels like they know you, Ollie, don't they?
Yeah.
Sort of, we've seen him on YouTube, so we feel like we know him, but. What many people perhaps don't know is that you just finished your masters.
Yes, literally, yeah.
So, and you'll have to remind me again. That was in.
Yeah, so that's in bioveterinary science and conservation.
Okay, everyone, you heard it here first. I'll keep asking him what that is, because my memory is like a sieve, and I won't remember what it is again. But the conservation side of things, and with the old and rare in the Canaries, and that's really a thread in lots of the things that we'll see today, isn't it?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
A number of the birds that you manage and that you maintain, and we will go down to the conservation project a little bit later on in the show. But there is that sort of I guess, ambition, that drive to say, look, this is a variety which is rare, and if I can do my bit to help it, whether that's to promote it, whether that's to breed numbers of it, then that can only really be a good thing.
Absolutely, you're spot on. I think this is one of the things that I'm keen to try and do across many of the different birds I've got and stuff, and I think the frills have proven to definitely be that. I did a video a few years ago on the frills specifically, just a short video looking at maybe a bit of the history of them and as them as a breed, and since that's come along, I've had numerous people say, Ollie, I've now got some frills because I saw them on your channel, which is fantastic. fantastic, and I'm hoping that it builds interest in the breeds that I think half the time people don't know actually exist.
Yeah.
It's one of those where if they knew it existed, they'd probably keep it, or even if the birds are available. So it's really nice to be able to contribute in that way as well.
And I think that's really important, mate. And I think a lot of what we do is about sort of trying to showcase the hobby and the good side of the hobby and the sort of positive side of the hobby, and certainly with the rarer varieties. I think when people think about a canary, they think about a small yellow thing which normally sits in a cage somewhere, and we know that the volume of birds, the variety of birds in the canaries is significant. What you've also got just above the canaries are my nemesis, Ollie, my nemesis. Now you have a stud of very nice quality. Are they all normals?
Yes, all normals. So I did, used to play about with mutations just more than anything. It's just a bit of fun. See what happens, see what the combinations bring. But right now we've got a sort of normal. So we actually have the 6 pairs on the back wall. These are what I'm going to say my premier quality Redpolls, let's say. This is the 6 pairs that I've got to breed from if I really want to breed from then. But we also actually, just behind us, Matt, we've got a quadruple in the bottom cage. So we've got a nice male with 3 different hens. So we've actually got 9 Redpoll hens and 7 cockbirds. And the idea really of keeping the Redpolls is, first off, mainly for the exhibition. They do quite well in the shows. I've really enjoyed developing the stud over the past 4 or 5 years now. I've got birds that I can track several generations that have been bred here, and I think that the quality is certainly improving. And as I learn more about the species and what you look for in an exhibition sense, it's going quite well.
Yeah, and I mean that's important, and I think you sort of your forensic mind on things, Ollie, and the way that you approach things, I think is all about learning. And I think that's really important for anyone thinking of sort of starting out in the hobby. I think what you've done is you've kind of done. You've had birds since you were a wee small boy.
Yes.
Not that you're not still a young man, but you've had birds of a variety of different types for well over a decade, and I think the important thing is that you have got that sort of that mentality to learn and understand, whether that's about habitat, whether that's about environment, whether that's about feeding, whether that's about the model of an actual bird. And I think that's to your great credit. A lot of people come into the hobby and want instant success. And what's always struck me about you is a kind of a willingness to learn. And I've found in this hobby, and I've got 30 years on you. Yeah. Although it doesn't look like it, everyone, does it? Yeah, it does. It does. It definitely.
No, Matt,
it definitely does.
A day over 21.
Oh, God bless you. God bless you. Yeah, not a day over 21. About 7,000 days over 21, mate. But I think as well, you've been fortunate, I know, as I have as well, to have a number of people to proverbially take you under your wing and help.
Yes, definitely so. It's one of those where, so I started keeping birds at 10. I'm 22 now, and over that time I've always had a mentor in whatever that species may be. So began with chickens and had a local sort of chicken breeder, just giving me a bit of advice, keeping them. Really enjoyed that, and then getting the aviary birds and knowing people from that. And I think that the British has really been where my sort of passion lies, if you like, and I'd had numerous people. One of them, big shout out to him, Stacey Turner. Stacey Turner's a local breeder to me, done very, very well, particularly with his cobalt Redpolls, winning gold at the World Show a few years ago, and he's taught me an awful lot. And I think always consulting with the more experienced breeders has really helped. First off, grow the knowledge and understand the species and the different breeds better, but make sure that the husbandry and the care for the birds is absolutely top notch. And I think it's one of those where you take the advice and then you try and put your own little spin on it, whatever that might be, to make sure that overall that you are successful and that the birds in their absolute top sort of condition or quality, if you like.
No, really, really important. I think that the mentors, and you for many people online. You fill that role as well for many people, and I think a lot of this game and a lot of the reasons I know you started the channel and I did it for the same reason, was to kind of to share the knowledge and to have in a form where it's not a book. But it's easily accessible for people.
Yeah, definitely so. I think that was one of the things when I was first sort of coming into the, let's say, cage and aviary bird world from the sort of poultry world. It was very much something that was difficult to access. I think we've seen, obviously, the internet has grown massively. So as has the information that you can access about birds. But I always look to share things, particularly on the channel, of I wish I'd have known this when I started, because that might have saved me 2 years of trial and error, or it might have, a bird that I might have lost due to, let's say, egg binding. I now know how to make sure that doesn't happen. Yeah. And if I can try and share that on the channel so that people don't make the same mistakes and can then, make sure that the birds are in a better place than themselves, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ollie, just behind you, we have arguably the world's scruffiest bird.
Yeah.
So I don't know a Greenfinch keeper who doesn't own at least one brush and a shovel. But the exhibition Greenfinch is you've got a number of pairs on behind us here. You've got the aviary there as well, and you've got young in the nest, and you've got young out the nest, which is great. And they're not a bird that I've had greenies in the past. They're not a bird that I can admire good ones, and I can admire quality ones, but it's just a mess. I mean, canaries are messy, but greenies are a whole other level, mate.
They really are. So I was just saying off camera, I probably sweep up in here 3 times a day. They're a bird that they'll get on the seed pot, and they always want the seed at the bottom, which is funny, isn't it? So they flick the head and the seed goes everywhere. It's all over the cage, it's all over the floor in the bird room. So they really are scruffy. And to be honest with you, that was why we built the flights outside that we'll see later, I'm sure. The idea was to have the greenies in there where they can go outside and they keep the bird room nice. But one thing led to another, and we've had to bring them in here because we've got something else outside.
We have, and we'll have a little look at them, I'm sure, a little bit later on. But the greenies, again, they're a bird you've done well with on the show bench. And was the plan always to sort of look to to establish yourself as an exhibitor, and with you mentioned before, Redpolls and Greenies normally take the top awards at shows. Not always, but normally do.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you look at the initial intention when I started off with the British 6 years ago, was let's first off try and experience a number of different species, because when you're breeding different species, you learn so much, and you see that sort of tip might translate over to another species, or maybe they're very different. But from the exhibition side of things, I think the intention was always to try and be, shall we say, competitive, particularly to begin with. But then now, having spoken to a lot of top breeders from not only around the UK but around Europe, where you find most of the top exhibitors are about, let's try and go for those absolute top major awards. I mean, one day I'd love to show my birds at the World Show, and let's aim for gold. Let's aim for high, because we can always come down a little bit if we need to. But let's aim for the top, and we'll see where we get. But I think that was definitely the idea with the greenies. I brought in birds from numerous different good bloodlines, and it's took, in all honesty, I've been breeding them now, the same stud, for 5-6 years. And I now feel that I'm getting to a point where, provided things go well this breeding season, I'm going to be able to put out numerous greenfinches across the classes, whether it be adult cocks and hens, young cocks and hens, and hopefully be competitive with them. And I'm still in the novice category at the moment. I'm coming to sort of my final year in the novice category, so maybe it'll see me jump up to champion very, very soon. We'll see how the breeding season goes with them, but the quality's certainly improving each year, and I think that's really important. You're progressing.
Yeah, so. And I think that's it for any bird keeper is, you measure your own progress on how your knowledge develops over time, your eye for a bird, how that comes in over a period of time, and then, as you say, I think sort of building that stud, so you've got almost your own stamp on a bird. You've created that that bird, which is a reflection of the A, to the standard, but B, to the qualities that you look for in a bird as well.
Definitely so. It's one of those where each show season, the show season is probably the time when I learn most about the what are we aiming for in terms of standard, the quality, and just little tips. But I learn something at least every year, which might be how maybe it's, let's say, a Greenfinch, for example, how it should be stood and positioned, or how maybe you don't want sometimes something that comes on particularly exhibition Greenfinches, large ones, is to get gills, as they call them, which is where the feathers overlap on the face. Do you want birds that have got, like, so we say, eyebrows? Well, you don't want eyebrows, you just want a large head on them. So very much learning something each year. And as you're saying about getting the stamp on the birds, I'm finding now that having had the stud and worked on them for 5 or 6 years, all of the birds, for the most part in my bird room, certainly the young birds I'm producing this year, have all got that single one common ancestor. Yeah. So you can see that sort of drain down the generations, and now mine are getting towards the point of where my best cock bird that's done a lot of winning for me over the past couple of years, pretty much every pair has some descendant of him in them. Yeah. So we're starting to see that now coming out into the youngsters and developing my own stamp on the Greenfinches.
Superb stuff. Yeah. We'll turn the camera in a minute, because in the corner, sitting on the nest, is it's a very beautiful bird. More of that in a second. Let's talk. I don't know why I'm whispering. You said she's bomb-proof.
No, she really is bomb-proof. The particular bird we're talking about, I can get within centimetres of the nest, and she's all right with me. I mean, I don't know how she finds other people are not usually in here, but she's fairly bomb-proof.
Yeah, I'm not putting my hand anywhere near her. It is, of course, the Hawfinch.
Yes, very
and
much
she's down on eggs at the moment.
Yeah, she is. So she's got 3 eggs. I'm pretty confident they're full. I haven't candled them, in all honesty, but looking at them from afar, they're fairly dark. They do look fertile. They're due to hatch in the next couple of days. So I was kind of hoping they might have hatched this morning, so we could have got some baby Hawfinches on camera. But they're still eggs at the moment. But yeah, this is the hen that bred for me last year. She's very used to this environment. She's actually quite used to cameras being in here, me talking. So yeah, it's quite good.
And I think that's a lot of things that. I don't necessarily think people who watch the shows that we put out appreciate and understand is that we do stand pretty much talking to ourselves in a room, and the cameras and everything else. The birds have to get used to them. It's great in here because they're obviously, it's a different voice today, but they're used to hearing your voice. They're used to the equipment, and actually it doesn't faze them at all. But that can have quite a destabilising impact and effect. Now, you had a really good year with them last year,
yes,
and then with all British finches, and particularly Hawfinches, it ended relatively disappointingly, but you'd learnt a lot from that process.
Very much so. So for anyone not familiar, we had a pair of Hawfinches last year, same hen, different male bird. We got 4 eggs off them, which was her first ever clutch. She had 4 chicks, reared them to 11 days. Now, very interesting with Hawfinches. I expected, being a larger bird, first off there'd be a longer incubation period. Her chicks hatched at 11 days, which is the same as a Redpoll, which is unbelievably surprising. And then when she was rearing those chicks, they jumped the nest at 11 days, which was very early again by comparison to something of similar size like a Greenfinch. What we found first off was that the chicks, when they leave the nest, are not quite mobile like a Redpoll or a Greenfinch. They are very much just little, I call them like loafs. They're just kind of this little bird that has little legs. It can't walk anywhere, and it's just a big ball of stuff. And they were sort of sat on the floor for the first few days. Now, the hen certainly meant to do this, but what she ended up doing was, we had 4 chicks, 2 cocks, 2 hens. She killed the 2 cockbirds initially. No idea why. It was one of those where I was keeping a close eye on them. I got cameras on them, but it was sort of too late before I could get to them. Yeah. So we lost these 2 male Hawfinch chicks, only 11, 12 days old at this point. Then we had 2 female chicks. She reared those chicks and was still in with them at about 65 days. There was no chance that I was weaning them early, and they were a bird that, at least talking to a lot of other breeders, were saying, yeah, Ollie, you want to be looking at maybe 40, 45 days as a weaning, not maybe 28 to 30 like a lot of other finches. And then for some reason, and I'm not sure whether it was their hen, the mother, influencing it, or whether it was the chicks maybe just gone too far, but we lost the 2 hens as well. So I had 4 chicks initially, and we lost all of them. So I learned an awful lot about it. I think the first thing I'd say was probably leaving her with 4 was a bit ambitious. A lot of people, what they do when breeding Hawfinches is they'll either take the first round and hand rear, or they'll leave the hen with 2 and they'll take whatever's extra and hand rear them or foster them out. And I didn't do that, hoping that the hen would do the job, and sadly she didn't. So I think what I'll be looking to do with these 3 eggs is, first off, let's hope all 3 hatch.
Yeah.
And if all 3 are hatching, I'll take one of them. We've got Greenfinches in sync, and I'm going to try and foster it under a Greenfinch. I have got hand rearing formula. I am getting a brooder and an incubator soon, so if I do need to do some hand rearing duties, I'm available to be able to do that. So I think that'll be the first thing. And I think the second thing is, I've got to be very careful what you feed them. Talking to some other breeders once again, they recommended making sure that what you don't feed Hawfinches, despite the fact that the adults like them, is anything that's got a very hard shell on them. So crickets, locusts, woodlice, things like that, do not feed them, because the young birds can't digest sort of the exoskeleton, if you like. So make sure it's only soft things. And I think secondly, and it's sadly to my bank account, is waxworms. Waxworms are so expensive, but they absolutely love them. This hen in particular will take them out of my finger through the cage bars. So I'm just going to have to make sure that I get a lot of waxworms in, which is what I didn't initially do a lot of last year. Yeah. A lot of mealworms, which, and granted were her favourite, and she was feeding a lot of them. I think the waxworms are going to be probably a bit more of a sort of deciding whether we're successful or not. And at the end of the day, it's birds. Ultimately, she's going to decide whether we're going to have success or not. I can just provide her with all the tools and hope that it works. Keep fingers crossed. And
I think that's, in a sentence there, mate, you've encapsulated everything about the hobby, which is, we can provide the best environment that we possibly can, and Mother Nature will decide ultimately whether it works or not. I certainly, for one, hope it does. She's looking at me with a beady eye now, so I think she's saying, "Get out of my room."
Yes, very much so. She's an interesting bird, because it's one of those where I can hand feed her, but as soon as she went to nest, and it happened last year, it happened this year, she beat up the cockbird literally within a day of incubation. So I've had to remove him. He's out in an aviary now, just on his own, doing his own thing. And they're so complex in the breeding behaviour. Every single pair is different. It's very much like a human. With canaries, you can kind of just put a male and a female together, and you're going to get eggs and chicks. With humans, they've got to have several dates, and then they decide they don't like each other, and then they decide they do, and they're awfully complex in that sense. So it's really hit and miss, and we'll see what happens.
Sounds like the story of my life right there, mate. So Ollie, we are in. We're at. Do you know? I watched the video on this as you were putting this together, and I was mightily impressed. I think what impressed me, well, there were 2 things that impressed me about it. One was the kind of attention to creating quite a real natural habitat, which I thought was lovely, mate. And then the second thing, and this is how easily impressed I am, wasn't your water feature, although, I admire your water feature. It was the cocoa on the back walls, and it just completely and utterly transformed. So what was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, so it was one of those where I'd looked at zoo habitats, if you like. What sets apart a home aviary from a zoo aviary? It's generally the background more than anything. And I was like, well, I mean, initially I'd looked at the option to create foam backgrounds and then paint them with like a sand paste and make it like a rock work. And I thought that's not going to be suitable. But I seen that I could buy really large rolls of coconut fibre. So I'll staple that onto the walls and have that as a a naturalistic background. It makes the birds look nicer, in my opinion anyway, than what you would just call maybe a harsh white, which is the UPVC back into it. And I also just found that I thought that the birds would pull at it for a bit of nest material, and they very much have done. So that was mainly the idea behind that, and then adding on we got some bamboo plants that were really quite cheap just from an online sort of garden centre, if you like. Picked up a few other bits, built a little water feature. I mean, it's nothing special, the water feature, but it just adds a bit of something, that you can see the birds interact with the environment. I think that's half of the enjoyment of it. Yeah. See the birds interact with the environment, not just watch the birds do their own thing. Yeah. So yeah.
And I think that, mate, I think that's really, I think that was the appeal. I think that was appeal. It's been a well-watched video, so that's obviously the appeal to everyone. But I think that was the appeal. And then the other thing that you've got going on here, which I think is, I know you did a similar thing with the Hawfinch, which is you've got the Nest Cam, which you live stream, and I think that is, for sort of, the avicultural world, and it kind of transcends between, aviculture and conservation, being able to see these things in an environment, a man-made environment, but a man-made environment which is as close to natural as possible, and then to capture on film the, almost the natural behaviour of it. Yeah.
Very, very much so. The idea of doing that was that I picked up this Nest camera thinking we could do something special here, and I tell you that the appeal of doing it for the reedlings was because in the wild there's restrictions on filming them. So I think that, off the top of my head, I think they're a Schedule 1 species or Schedule 4. It's one of the two of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. And what it means is you have to have specific licenses to actually film the nests and film their breeding behaviour in the wild and stuff, which means there's actually very little sort of observations on them. So being able to do it in captivity means you kind of see almost never before seen stuff that is just amazing. So having the camera live streaming online first means that people can see it themselves as it's happening, which is a very different feature than normal, but also means that I get to record it and go, hey, I didn't even know they did this. So one of the things I had no idea that they did up until having this camera was I fully anticipated they were very much like finches in that the female would do all of the incubation and she'd do the majority of the feeding, where actually it's very much a 50-50 job. The male will sit on the nest half the time and incubate the eggs. The male actually, I noticed in the first few days, was feeding the chicks more than the hen was. So it just created a whole different sort of picture and angle to it, and it was really interesting to see. And as you say about the aviculture and conservation side, it's something that people can do as well at home. This is not a really specialist, very, really expensive piece of equipment. This is something you can buy online that you can do in your home aviary. So being able to give the people the ideas means that hopefully other people go, actually, I'd really like to do that. That'd be fantastic. So yeah, it's a nice feature, and it's something I've probably wanted to do for a while, is having a plant an aviary and bringing on some soft bills that are, in all honesty, commonly kept by comparison to some other species and more easily bred than something, let's say, a red starter, a flycatcher or what. It's brought a whole different look of different things for aviculture and be able to promote on the channel, and something for me to differently learn with. I mean, there's only 500 of these guys, the bearded reedlings, actually in the wild in the UK, so maybe these will go into a conservation project, we'll see. Yeah,
good stuff. And you mentioned flycatcher, and sort of fascinated by the fruit. Are they fruit flies?
Yeah, very much fruit flies. So I've got a little fish tank down in the corner.
We'll get a shot of that in a minute, everyone, because it's, I don't know whether to be sort of horrified or yeah. But I mean, what it does show, Ollie, is it demonstrates both the dedication to, providing the necessary things that these birds need, and that's to your great credit. You're not cutting corners on this. You've got a culture going. You've got the sort of the fruit fly traps in there, and we're hoping very soon that the eggs that she's sitting on will yield some more young for you.
Yeah, very much so. So we got two from the first round. We sadly lost one of them. It drowned in about 5 mil of water. As birds, sometimes it happens. I just need to change things a little bit slightly when the next one's hatch and it looked to fledge. But yeah, on that with the fruit fly, so we got a little culture going about 10,000 fruit fly in there, and it literally, when the first ones hatched, that's all they fed for about the first 5 days. I was going in and putting pinkies and buffaloes in for them, and they were not being touched at all. It was just fruit fly, and I think that's very similar to what they'd eat in the wild. You know, in the wild, they live in dense reed beds in wetlands, and there's going to be a lot of like gnats and midges and things that are up and around the water. So it's getting as close to nature as I really possibly can. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd plant this completely as a reed bed and we'd just have reeds growing everywhere. But that's quite challenging to do that. And also, you know, I'd have to probably build almost a whole pond in here so that we can have a decent water level. But trying to get it as close to nature as possible to learn as much about them as I can is, you know, fantastic and what it's all about.
Superb. So listen, by the magic of television, we clicked our fingers, didn't we, Ollie? And we've arrived at the Twite project now.
Yeah.
You might be able to tell from Ollie's hair, and you might be able to hear it. It's absolutely bucketing it down outside.
Yeah.
You said before, mate, didn't you? I think we've had 8 weeks of rain now.
Yeah. This is what it is. We've had 8 weeks of no rain up until this moment, and it's used all that 8 weeks worth built up right now. So it's like a monsoon outside.
It is. I'll get the straighteners on mine later, so I'll be fine. So, Ollie, I think one of the fascinating things, obviously, seeing your documentary on the Twite project, and one of the, I think, the fascinating things, and we've touched on it a little bit in the show, is that sort of you bridging the gap between aviculture and conservation, and are to be applauded for that, because, you know, I think we talked before about, you know, a lot of the British bird keepers or the native bird keepers in the sort of 60s and 70s used to have their own sort of way of conservation. They'd breed birds, and then, you know, some young they'd release into the back into the wild and the likes. And obviously a lot of things have changed since then. So I'm fascinated by this setup. It's in a rural location, and I think a commitment to you in that, you know, it's not 2 minutes down the road, mate, is it? Yeah. It's a journey get here.
It is very much so. You know, it's sadly right now it's not on my doorstep, but you know, it's certainly worth coming here.
Yeah, no, absolutely it is. And I think, you know, one of the other things, and Ollie and I had a conversation off camera earlier on about the sort of ambition of the project, and, you know, what it's trying to do, and you know, one of the questions I asked, which we've seen Ollie's exhibition Greenfinches, and they're clearly, the exhibition Greenfinch is very far removed from the wild type Greenfinch, but the same isn't the case with the Twite, and that's why I think you were mentioning before as well, Ollie, that a lot of work has gone on behind the scenes in sort of genome profiling and the likes, you know, more than the kind of hobbyist would even consider and think of to ensure that the stock that you've got here that you're breeding, A, is wild type, and B, is native to these lands.
Yeah, very much so. So what the situation is with the Twite is that there's very little sort of domestication. So, you know, you look at the Greenfinch, as you say, they're very far removed from the wild type, whereas the Twites are awfully similar, if not the same. So I've had experts come, people who have been ringing Twite for decades in the wild, in the Pennines and the Lake District and area, and they've said, like, physiologically, so physically, the birds are exactly the same as the wild birds. So we're not seeing an increase in size of the birds. The birds are not differently marked. You know, if you compared like Redpolls in captivity to ones in the wild, ours are very much better marked birds, whereas the ones in the wild are very loosely. So the Twites are physiologically the same, and there's been some money and a lot of time and effort and resources put into sort of genome profiling and getting the birds and doing some DNA analysis on them. So we've had samples, historical samples from the Peak District and the various areas in the UK. We've got current samples that were sampled only last year in 2024, and we've got samples from my birds. And the idea of that was to compare sort of the DNA and the build-up of those birds and see how they differ or how they're similar. And it's actually, we're pretty confident now, and we're yet to get that fully confirmed, but we will be soon, is that the twites we have are exactly the same as what's left or has been historically in Britain. So these are endemic, these are native twites to Britain, which is very pleasing news.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then the plan obviously is, you know, at some stage, well, obviously, firstly, you've got to have a good breeding season, so everything crossed for that, mate. And then obviously to sort of move into in future years a sort of soft release and then a, you know, an established release as well.
Yeah, very much so. It's a work in progress, and I think there's not been an awful lot of successful like passerine reintroductions, and that's not just nationwide, that's internationally. So there's a lot to learn. There's probably going to be a lot of trial and error. You know, that's one of the things that comes with this, is no one quite knows how to do it, and it's going to differ between species. So there's a lot of planning to go on. We have to get licensing, of course, and we've got to prepare the birds for the wild. You know, this is a very different environment to what it's like in the wild, and it's going to be the course over several generations of reverting them back to that wild type, so they're performing, you know, natural foraging behaviours. They know how to feed themselves in the wild when they go out there. And even nesting, you know, in captivity, look at twites, they'll nest 6 foot off of the floor, yet in the wild, they're birds that nest in the undergrowth under some heather or bracken, and we need to make sure that the birds at least know how to do that, because we do not want to be releasing birds that think they need to nest in a tree in some treeless moorland.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, there's an awful lot that kind of that goes into this, and there's an awful lot of thought and consideration. And I guess, you know, the big question for many people who are watching the channel will be, you know, what's kind of next for you? So you've just finished your masters.
Yes.
Is the sort of conservation side of things married with the avicultural side? And that's not, you know, often they're not natural bedfellows, but you kind of transcend both of them with ease, really. Is that the kind of the aim, the long-term aim?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, combining aviculture with conservation is something that hasn't been done particularly lots of. You know, I think there's very much a divide at the moment between sort of, shall we say, zoo aviculturalists and hobbyists. It's very, very different. And I think something that needs to be recognised, and probably is going to be over time, is that hobbyist aviculturists have an awful lot of knowledge and experience that could be very useful for the people in conservation in zoos and things like that. You know, you have people here who don't keep and look after birds because they're paid to, they keep because they want to. And when you have a passion for something like that, you understand them a lot more, you do a lot more research rather than you're not just going in to feed them every day or so.
Sure.
So I think it would definitely be a really wanted route for me, is to go down the conservation aviculture side. And you know, we was talking off camera, it's not just the twites, we've got some turtle doves here. It's looking very much like we're going to have an influx of black grouse in October, November time. We're a lot of planning is going in.
Andrew, if you watch, and Andrew's Ollie's dad, if you're watching this, mate, just keep an eye on the garage. That's all. They won't go in the garage, everyone. That was a joke. But Andrew, I can't help but fear that, you know, your beautiful home might be inundated with grouse very soon. So
this is it. You know, the grouse are just one of many species on the list. We're hoping for maybe tree sparrows, redback shrike, corncrake, Dalmatian pelicans. We'll see what it is. You know, storks, we will see, but it's progressing the right way, and I'm hopeful that we can build a larger conservation breeding facility for loads of these different endangered native species for future reintroduction.
And I think one of the things as well, Ollie, and you know, say I mentioned it before, we really enjoyed the sort of Twite project video, which is quite documentary style, and I think the sort of the marriage between, as you said, the people who keep the birds for a passion rather than being paid for them, but then also sort of developing that knowledge and taking that knowledge in a manner and in a way and in a style which is, sort of professionally done but accessible to all. And I think, you need to take a great deal of credit, mate, for that, because I think you've transcended those two worlds, but you've shared it to an audience. And I think that knowledge builds an understanding, and that's really important.
Yeah. No, thank you. It's it's something that I'm developing, and as we're trying to share more knowledge in those things, I'm hopefully going to get an opportunity. I was on about this off camera. Possibly at the start of 2026 to actually go over to Brazil and been offered, given an opportunity to go over and film a bird called the blue-eyed ground dove. So they're a very, very small species of endangered dove. There's only 11 or 12 of them left in the wild. There's a very small population in captivity in the same site. So, hopefully it's going to see OC Aviary go international, and we'll be filming a documentary in the Amazon next year. But, there's a lot that has to happen before that, and I'm just going to do everything I can to make sure that does go ahead. And it'd be great to not only share the knowledge between sort of aviculturalists there, but also share it online, because I think it's a world that has been very much hidden away for time, and it would be lovely if people could just see just how big that world is and how big it could be by bringing those worlds together. Yeah,
and I think that's it, mate. I think the combining those two things, combining that sort of that passion, that knowledge, can only benefit. Ultimately can only benefit the species that we've got such a focus on. And regardless of where you sit in or what you describe yourself as, that can really only be a good thing, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's hopefully something that by sharing it more as well will encourage and let other people know that this is something you can do. I was very lucky to be sort of recruited for this by a conservation charity, and then I'm now going on to work on so many different things with them. And I think look at that this is just at this point in time, that's a 19-year-old lad breeding some birds in his shed at home, and now how can that progress? But also it is something that more and more people could hopefully get into in time.
Yeah, no, absolutely superb. Well, it is an incredible setup here. The rain is starting to hold off a little bit. So you've talked on your own channel about the setup here. You've got a really nice big aviary here with the turtle doves in. You've got the aviaries along this sort of wall here, and then your episode just recently talked about some more plans that you've got. So, it's a fabulous. It's the kind of bird room, to be honest, that you'd be like, yeah, I'd like one of those in my house, but it's massive. Yeah. So you'd need a fair old size plot to get it in, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. The shed is 10 by 6 meters. So this is big. This is not a shed. This is a cabin. This is a large caravan size. This we're very fortunate to be able to get this to use for that. But it is something that at least my back garden this would not fit in. And I'm sure for many others.
Or mine, or I think many people watching the channel would feel the same.
Yeah.
Oh, dearie me, superb. And then we've caught you just before feeding a little bit of something else to the Twite. So it was heather, was it?
Yeah, that's it. So what I always try and look to do is how can we replicate nature as closely as possible, not only just in the conservation birds, but my own birds at home. And something with Twite that I found, and I'm continuing to research their sort of behaviour and their diet and stuff, has been feeding heather flowers. So what will happen in the wild is as the heather starts to mature, both the adult birds and juvenile birds will eat that, and it generally will give them a much better health of crop, if you like. It's some fibre into the diet, but I think it's also a natural stimulant to encourage them to breed. It's very much something that when the heather's available, the Twite are going to be into breed. And so what I've been doing is buying, it's literally dried heather flower. It's from a sort of a herbal remedy shop, if you like, online, and I only get 500 grams at a time, but just putting a sprinkle of that on every week for them, they really enjoy it. It does them the world of good, and it really is bringing them into breeding condition. I think the more we can try and look to nature for certain things and go, we forgot about that, from how far aviculture's come. Let's make sure that we go back to the roots sometimes. If we can have those wild foods and things that the birds would eat, it could only benefit.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we see here that they clearly, as soon as you put it in, they were all like, "Ooh, I want a bit of this."
Yeah, very, very much so. It's very like comparable to if you give a dandelion to a greenfinch. They're like, "Oh, look at that!" Boom, straight on it. So yeah, the twites are exactly the same with heather. It's great,
superb stuff. And then these little doves fascinate me, Ollie. These turtle doves in here. They're again the enclosure. You've kind of developed that sort of multi-layered of perches, different size perches, bit of cover in there as well. They're not renowned for their nest building skills, are they? It's safe to say.
No, they certainly aren't. If you've ever seen a pigeon nest, a dove nest, or anything like that, it's often surprising that it can actually sustain the weight of an egg, never mind the whole bird. They really are the most flimsiest of nests with a couple of twigs. Now, we are gifted, thankfully, in aviculture that we can put proper nest bowls up and platforms that mean that the egg isn't going to fall through. But yeah, they certainly aren't engineers, are they?
No, certainly not, mate. Certainly not. Right, well, ladies and gents, we have come to the end of what I'm sure you will agree has been a fabulous episode. Ollie, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing with us a little bit more about you, because I think sometimes we see you on screen, but we think we know you, but I think everybody's found out a little bit more about you today.
I hope so. I think so. It's one of those where I try and always get my personality across a bit more and try and make it very authentic. I'm not reading from a script. This is me.
Yeah.
So I think that's important, and I think hopefully it should be very well received, and a lot of my audience hopefully come over to your channel as well. So we might get you to 30,000 subs soon. We'll see.
I won't count on it, anyone. But listen, that's a really good plug. If you haven't subscribed, like the video, hit the subscribe button. You'll already be subscribed to OC Aviary, but if you're not, on the odd chance you're not, and you will be, but if you're not, pop over to Ollie's channel as well and give him a subscribe, and keep an eye on what he's doing. As I said before, not many people sort of bridge the gap between aviculture and conservation, and Ollie is on the pathway to doing that. So fair play to you, mate. Been an absolute pleasure as always.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Really enjoy it.
It's been really, really, really enjoyable. So listen, everyone, until next time, whenever that is. Take care.
Cheers.